Hello, moving on now to Psalm 108. A song, a psalm of David. My heart is firm, O God. I will sing and chant a hymn with all my soul. Awake, O harp and lyre. I will wake the dawn. I will praise you among the peoples, O Lord. Sing a hymn to you among the nations. For your faithfulness is higher than the heavens. Your steadfastness reaches to the sky. Exalt yourself over the heavens, O God. Let your glory be over all the earth, that those whom you love may be rescued. Deliver with your right hand and answer me. God promised in his sanctuary that I would exultingly divide up Shechem and measure the valley of Sukkot. Gilad and Manasseh would be mine. Ephraim my chief stronghold, Judah my scepter. Moab would be my wash basin. On Edom I would cast my shoe. I would raise a shout over Philistia. Would that I were brought to the bastion. Would that I were led to Edom. But you have rejected us, O God. God, you do not march with our armies. Grant us your aid against the foe, for the help of man is worthless. With God we shall triumph. We will trample our foes. The last verse, Ba Elohim na'aseh chayil. With God or through God we shall triumph. We shall gain strength. We shall gain victory. Vehu yavus tsarenu. He will trample our foes, our enemies. Now, this is a psalm that, of course, is militaristic, and the psalmist is coming from a place of reflecting upon the role of God in warfare. The psalmist is keenly aware that without God on the side of the people will not be able to triumph over their enemies. And so the psalmist recognizes that only with God on the side of the people can the people prevail. Now, what can this possibly have to do with us in today's day and age when we are not part necessarily of an army or a military? We are not involved in a military action or in warfare. So we might read the psalm and say to ourselves, this really has nothing to do with me. But in many ways, it has everything to do with us. If we interpret it and look at it in the context of our lives in the world today. We may not be bearing arms and fighting in an actual war, but we are engaged in many ways in a different kind of battle. The battle is the battle for good against evil, for an attitude of service and caring and compassion and goodness as against an attitude of selfishness and power mongering and violence, emotional violence committed against other people. We recognize that as we engage in this battle and as we try to fight for what is right in our world, as we strive for economic justice and equity among all peoples, as we fight for the right of every individual in our land to have equal opportunities and equal rights, we understand that we continue to fight this battle with a feeling that God is in our presence and fighting alongside of us. If we separate ourselves from God, imagining that we don't need God as we go through this different kind of warfare, if we imagine that we can do this strictly on our own without God's help, then we are bound to lose. And how is it that God helps us? And how is it that we can develop this kind of consciousness and awareness of a spiritual power that gives us the strength and inspiration to carry on? Well, we can do this through the mechanisms of prayer, of worship, and of meditation, of study, of learning about the values and teachings of our tradition, by reminding ourselves that God, throughout the ages, has given us, through the Torah, a series of guidelines and principles that govern the way we live. Those guidelines and principles help direct our goals and our values in line with compassion and mercy and justice and fairness. And so the battle we wage is against injustice, against cruelty, against those who care nothing about other people and their needs, but only about themselves and their own power. And so we think about God during these days, and just by reflecting on God's nearness to us, we gain strength and we gain courage. In some of the Eastern religions and Eastern traditions, yoga is one of them, as an example. The image of the warrior is very much present in their religious practices, or in the case of yoga, even in certain kinds of yoga exercises and poses. The warrior pose is one of them, for example, where the practitioner adopts a kind of a posture of the warrior in order to focus on gaining more access to the practitioner's own inner spiritual power and strength. The warrior is the one who understands that true power, the true power that holds value and not temporary but permanent meaning, is the power that aligns with our innermost soul and spirit, and therefore naturally aligns with God's power and spirit. All of us can be warriors. We need to be warriors. We are not carrying and bearing arms, but we are bearing spiritual military tools, in a sense, the tools that help us to advance the causes of goodness in our world. There is so much that is broken and troubled around us. Let us not succumb to fear and hopelessness and anxiety. Let us not fool ourselves into imagining that we are powerless and can do nothing to advance the cause of a just and humane society. Each of us has the power to do this. And when we do it together, and when we band together as one, together with God, we can do so much to make this broken world a better place, to repair the breaches that we find surrounding us. Let us not despair. Let us not give up. Let's forge on together forward in the battlefield of goodness and righteousness. Thank you.